6 tanks, 250 infantry, white-clad figures advancing across a snow-covered field toward a tree line held by fewer than 20 Americans. And standing between them, alone, exposed on top of a burning tank destroyer that could detonate at any second, a 19-year-old kid from Texas who weighed 130 pounds, soaking wet. For the next hour, Second Lieutenant Audie Murphy did something that defied every reasonable instinct a human being possesses. He stayed. When it was over, when the ammunition was spent and the Germans had retreated, someone asked him why'd he done it. His answer didn't fill a paragraph. It barely filled a sentence. They were killing my friends. This is the story of Audie Murphy, the most decorated American combat soldier of the Second World War, a man who received every military combat award for valor the United States Army could give, and who carried wounds no medal could honor for the rest of his life. To understand what Audie Murphy did on that frozen afternoon in France, you have to understand where he came from. He was born June 20th, 1925 in Kingston, Texas, a small rural community in Hunt County about 60 miles northeast of Dallas. He was the 7th of 12 children born to Emmett and Josie Bell Murphy. The family were sharecroppers, poor in a way most Americans today would struggle to imagine. His father drifted in and out of their lives before abandoning the family entirely. His mother worked herself to exhaustion, trying to hold things together. Audie left school after the 5th grade, not because he didn't want to learn, because his family needed to eat. He picked cotton for $1 a day. He pumped gas, worked in a radio repair shop, but it was his skill with a rifle that mattered most. Audie hunted rabbits and squirrels to put food on the table. Sometimes there was only one shell, so he learned to make every shot count. In 1941, his mother died. Audie was 16 years old. His 3 youngest siblings were sent to an orphanage. The family he had fought so hard to hold together was scattered. Then Pearl Harbor happened, and Audie Murphy saw his way out. He tried to enlist in the Marines. They turned him away. Too small, too young. The Navy said the same. The Army initially rejected him too. He stood 5 feet 5, weighed about 110 pounds. But Murphy was not a young man who took no for an answer. With the help of his older sister, who signed an affidavit adding a year to his age, Audie enlisted in the United States Army on June 30th, 1942. He was 17 years old. He was assigned to Company B, 1st Battalion, 15th Infantry Regiment, 3rd Infantry Division, the Rock of the Marne, a unit with a legacy stretching back to the First World War, and it was about to gain a soldier whose name would become synonymous with courage. By January 1945, the war in Europe was grinding toward its conclusion, but the grinding was brutal. While the world's attention focused on the Battle of the Bulge to the north, another fierce engagement was playing out in the Alsace region of eastern France. The Colmar Pocket, an 850 square mile area in the Vosges Mountains, was the last significant German foothold on French soil. The German 19th Army had dug in and was refusing to leave. The mission to collapse the Colmar Pocket fell primarily to the French First Army, reinforced by American units, including the 3rd Infantry Division. By this point in the war, Audie Murphy was no longer the raw recruit who had shipped overseas in 1943. He had fought through North Africa, Sicily, Italy, including the brutal fighting at Anzio and the invasion of southern France. He had been wounded multiple times. He had earned the Distinguished Service Cross, 2 Silver Stars, 2 Bronze Stars, and 3 Purple Hearts. He had risen from private to 2nd lieutenant through battlefield commissions, promoted not by paperwork, but by the undeniable evidence of his leadership under fire. But the Colmar Pocket would test him in ways nothing else had. The 15th Infantry Regiment moved into position near the village of Holtzwihr on January 24, 1945. The fighting was immediate and devastating. On January 25th, every officer in Company B became a casualty, except Murphy. He assumed command of a company reduced from 120 men to fewer than 20 still fit to fight. The frozen ground made it nearly impossible to dig foxholes. The men were exhausted, undersupplied, surrounded by a landscape that favored the defenders. And the Germans were not finished. January 26, 1945, approximately 1400 hours. Company B held a position at the southern edge of the Bois de Rivière, a stretch of forest north of Holtzwihr. Their mission? Hold the tree line until reinforcements arrived. Murphy was at his forward command post with a field telephone connected to battalion artillery. 2 M10 tank destroyers were positioned nearby for support. Then he saw them. 6 German tanks emerging from Holtzwihr. Behind them, wave after wave of infantry in white snow camouflage. An estimated 250 soldiers of the German 2nd Mountain Division transferred to the Colmar region from Norway. Fresh, aggressive, advancing directly toward Company B's position. Murphy grabbed the field phone, called for artillery fire. Shells began landing among the advancing Germans, but they kept coming. The situation deteriorated fast. One of the M10 tank destroyers took a direct hit and burst into flames. Its crew abandoned the vehicle and fled to the woods. The second tank destroyer had slid into a ditch, its guns useless. Murphy ordered his men to fall back to prepared positions deeper in the forest. The right call. They were outgunned, outmanned, about to be overrun. But Murphy didn't go with them. He stayed at his position, firing his M1 carbine at the advancing enemy, still directing artillery by phone. When he'd emptied his carbine ammunition, he looked to his right. The burning M10 tank destroyer, still smoldering, its 50 caliber machine gun still mounted on the turret, and its ammunition still loaded. What happened next would become one of the most extraordinary acts of individual combat courage in American military history. Audie Murphy climbed onto a burning tank destroyer. Let that settle. The vehicle had taken a direct hit from a German tank. It was on fire. Its fuel and ammunition could cook off and detonate at any second. Smoke poured from the hole. The metal was hot. And a 19-year-old lieutenant, wounded, alone, exposed to fire from 3 sides, pulled himself onto it, grabbed the 50 caliber machine gun, and opened fire. The effect was immediate. The heavy machine gun tore into the advancing German infantry. Soldiers in white snow capes began falling across the field. The 50 cal's range and stopping power were devastating at the distances Murphy was engaging. He kept firing. The Germans couldn't pinpoint where the fire was coming from through the smoke and chaos. Their infantry assault, organized and aggressive, began to waver. The tanks, losing their infantry support, hesitated. Meanwhile, Murphy was still on the phone, still calling artillery adjustments, directing fire onto the enemy while simultaneously cutting them down with the machine gun. For an hour, the Germans threw everything they had at him. Small arms, machine guns, tank fire, mortar rounds. Concussion from an artillery burst nearly knocked him from the vehicle. Shell fragments shredded the map in his hand, but left him unscathed. A German squad tried to flank him from the right, creeping through the snow. Murphy spotted them, wiped them out. Enemy soldiers got as close as 10 yards. He mowed them down. He took a wound to the leg. He kept firing. The smoke from the burning tank destroyer swirled around him. The vehicle could have exploded at any moment during that entire hour. Murphy knew it. He stayed anyway. When the 50 caliber finally ran dry, Murphy climbed off the tank destroyer. He walked back through the forest to his company. He refused medical attention for his wound, and then he organized a counterattack. The men of Company B, inspired by what they had just witnessed, followed their lieutenant back into the fight. The Germans, already shaken and demoralized, withdrew toward Holtzwihr. The woods held. Murphy's stand on the burning tank destroyer did not just save Company B. It held a position critical to the entire Colmar Pocket offensive. The Bois de Rivière dominated the approaches to Holtzwihr. Losing it would have opened a gap in the American line at a moment the division could not afford one. The next day, January 27th, reinforced American units captured Holtzwihr. By January 28th, the area north of the Colmar Canal was clear of enemy forces. The Colmar Pocket would be fully collapsed by early February, eliminating the last German foothold west of the Rhine in that sector. Murphy's artillery direction and his one-man defense killed or wounded approximately 50 German soldiers. His actions were witnessed by the men of his company from the tree line, men who would later testify in disbelief at what they had seen their lieutenant do. On February 16th, Murphy was promoted to first lieutenant and awarded the Legion of Merit. He was moved from the front lines to regimental headquarters as a liaison officer. The Army had decided that the most decorated soldier in its ranks was too valuable to risk losing. On June 2, 1945, near Salzburg, Austria, Lieutenant General Alexander Patch presented Audie Murphy with the Medal of Honor. In total, he earned 33 awards and decorations, including French and Belgian honors for heroism. He was and remains one of the most decorated American combat soldiers in history. The Medal of Honor was awarded for conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity involving risk of life above and beyond the call of duty. Near Holtzwihr, France, January 26, 1945, Commanding Company B, attacked by 6 tanks and waves of infantry, Murphy ordered his men to withdraw to prepared positions. He remained forward at his command post, continuing to direct artillery fire by telephone. When a nearby tank destroyer was hit and set ablaze, Murphy mounted the burning vehicle and engaged the enemy with its .50 caliber machine gun. Alone, exposed to fire from 3 sides. For an hour, the Germans attempted to eliminate him using every available weapon. He held his position, destroyed a squad attempting to flank him, engaged enemy soldiers who approached within 10 yards. Wounded in the leg, he continued fighting until his ammunition was exhausted. He then returned to his company, refused medical attention, and organized a counterattack that forced the Germans to withdraw. His courage and his refusal to yield saved his company from encirclement and destruction, and enabled them to hold the woods that had been the enemy's objective. Audie Murphy came home from the war as the most famous soldier in America. His face appeared on the cover of Life magazine. Actor James Cagney invited him to Hollywood. Murphy starred in more than 40 films, including the 1955 adaptation of his own memoir, To Hell and Back, which became Universal Studios' highest-grossing film of the decade. But fame did not bring peace. Murphy suffered severely from what was then called battle fatigue, what we now recognize as post-traumatic stress disorder. He was plagued by nightmares and insomnia. He slept with a loaded pistol under his pillow. He struggled with an addiction to prescribed sleeping pills. And when he recognized the addiction, he locked himself in a motel room and went through withdrawal alone. But here's what matters most about what Murphy did after the war. He talked about it. At a time when discussing the psychological wounds of combat was considered weakness, when the culture told veterans to bury their pain and move on, Audie Murphy broke that silence. He spoke publicly about his struggles. He called on the government to study the emotional impact of combat and to extend mental health benefits to returning veterans. He did this not for himself. He did it for every soldier who came home carrying invisible wounds. From Korea, from Vietnam, from wars yet to come. His advocacy helped pave the way for the recognition and treatment of PTSD that veterans receive today. After his death, Congress passed legislation that led to the dedication of the Audie L. Murphy Memorial VA Hospital in San Antonio, Texas, a facility that continues to serve veterans. Murphy also refused to trade on his fame in ways that compromised his values. Despite chronic financial struggles, he declared bankruptcy in 1968. He turned down lucrative offers to endorse alcohol and cigarettes because he did not want to be a bad influence on young people. On May 28, 1971, Audie Murphy was killed when the private plane he was traveling in crashed into Brush Mountain near Roanoke, Virginia. Conditions of fog, zero visibility. He was 45 years old. He was buried with full military honors at Arlington National Cemetery on June 7, 1971. In attendance were the U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, the Army Chief of Staff, and soldiers of the 3rd Infantry Division, the unit he had served with from North Africa to the heart of Germany. Before his death, Murphy made one final request regarding his burial. He asked that his headstone be plain and unadorned, like that of any ordinary soldier. No gold leaf, no special markings, just his name, his rank, and his service. Today, his gravesite at Arlington is the second most visited in the entire cemetery, surpassed only by that of President John F. Kennedy. The Sergeant Audie Murphy Club, established by the U.S. Army in 1986, honors non-commissioned officers who exemplify his standards of leadership, integrity, and selfless service. His name is carried by hospitals, schools, and memorials across the country, including in his home state of Texas. And in Holtzwihr, France, a monument stands at the exact spot where a teenager from Hunt County climbed onto a burning vehicle and held the line. What can the story of Audie Murphy teach those of us who will never face 6 tanks and 250 enemy soldiers? More than you might think. Responsibility doesn't wait for permission. Murphy didn't ask to be the last officer standing in Company B. He didn't request command. When every other officer fell, he stepped into the role because someone had to, and he was there. In leadership, in business, in family, the moments that define you rarely arrive on your schedule. They arrive when they arrive. The question is whether you're prepared to step forward. Courage is not the absence of fear. It's the decision that something else matters more. Murphy was afraid. He said so himself. He described walking away from that tank destroyer in a daze, too exhausted and shaken to care if the Germans shot him in the back. Courage didn't eliminate his fear. It overruled it. His men mattered more than his safety. The mission mattered more than his comfort. That calculus, what matters more, is one every leader faces, usually in far less dramatic circumstances. The hardest battles often come after the visible ones end. Murphy fought Germans for 3 years. He fought the invisible wounds of combat for the rest of his life. And he chose, deliberately, publicly, to use his pain to help others. That takes a different kind of courage. The courage to be vulnerable. The courage to say, I am not okay. And that's not weakness. Integrity has a price, and it's worth paying. Murphy went bankrupt rather than endorse products he believed would harm young people. He could have solved his financial problems overnight with the cigarette ad. He refused, not because he was wealthy enough to afford principles. He wasn't, but because his character was worth more than his comfort. Small beginnings do not determine final outcomes. A 5th grade dropout, a sharecropper's son, rejected by 3 branches of the military for being too small. None of that defined what Audie Murphy became. What defined him was what he chose to do when the moment demanded everything he had. Audie Murphy didn't have advantages. He didn't have connections. He didn't have a plan that mapped out his path from a cotton field to the Medal of Honor. What he had was a decision to step forward when stepping back was easier. A decision to stay when leaving was safer. A decision to speak when silence was simpler. You will probably never stand on a burning tank destroyer, but you will face your own version of that moment. A moment when the easy choice and the right choice are not the same. A moment when someone needs you to stay, even when every instinct says, go. A moment when your voice is the one that needs to break the silence. When that moment comes, and it will, Ask yourself one question. What matters more? Audie Murphy answered that question on a frozen field in France. He answered it in a Hollywood career he refused to compromise. He answered it in a conversation about invisible wounds that he didn't have to start. Now it's your turn. This episode is dedicated to the memory of First Lieutenant Audie Leon Murphy, and to every service member who carries wounds, visible and invisible, in service to something greater than themselves.